Hello, my name is Adam Harris Levine, and I'm Assistant Curator of European Art at the Art Gallery of Ontario. Welcome to today's Close Looking, Daguerreotypes of the Philippines. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Dr. Noemí Espinosa Fernandez, Assistant Curator at the Hispanic Society Museum and Library in New York, and Katharine Whitman, our photography conservator here at the AGO. Today's episode of Close Looking will do a deep dive into a series of photographs that are on view in our current exhibition, Faith and Fortune, Art Across the Global Spanish Empire. The photographs are in the final gallery of the exhibition, and they were guest curated by Tani Ann Makabali Pantig. So today's conversation will look at the sort of context and history and materials and technology of making these daguerreotypes of the Philippines. Before we begin, I want to start with a land acknowledgement. The land that the AGO is built on is the Mississauga Anishinaabe territory of the Mississauga. It is also governed by a treaty between the Mississauga of the Credit and the Canadian government. Toronto is Mississauga Anishinaabe territory. It has also been occupied by other Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat confederacies. So we're going to begin today with remarks from Noemí, telling us about the context in which these daguerreotypes were created. Thanks, I'll turn it over to Noemí.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me and give me the opportunity to talk about these beautiful images of all Philippines that are exhibited for the very first time there in the Art Gallery of Toronto. The Hispanic Society holds the largest collection of daguerreotypes of the Philippines in the world. Daguerreotypes photographed on a careful polished silver coat copper plate were the first photographic process patented in France in 1839. Based on the photographic technique and the French style of the original housings, they are dated between 1845-46. Among the candidates to the authorship, we consider Jules Itier, a French custom inspector and member of the Lagrange mission, who arrived in the Philippines for the first time in 1844. The collection reveals, possibly for the first time, the importance of the Philippines in the early history of photography in Asia, a topic that awaits further study. Its geographical location in the middle of commercial routes of Asia made the Philippines one of the most profitable colonies of the Spanish monarchy from the moment when Miguel López de Legazpi founded Manila in 1571. The daguerreotypes show a 19th century world in all its splendor. Views of the city as it was before the most destructive earthquake of the 1860s or the Japanese bombs that obliterated the town in 1940. In addition to Spaniards, other Europeans and Americans arrived in the Philippines during the 18th and 19th century, lured by the richness of the natural resources of the islands and its geographical position, which facilitated trade with other neighboring countries. The daguerreotypes offer a unique glimpse into the commercial history of the United States in the South China Sea and depict places familiar to the foreign merchants. They originally belonged to Charles Griswold, a member of the Russell and Sturgis, one of the first American companies established in the Philippines. He, in turn, passed them on to a descendant, Charles G. Massa, a New York engineer who donated them to the Hispanic Society in 1929. The daguerreotypes were made in the city of Manila, a suburb of Marikina, at that time a country retreat for the wealthy near the capital, and also in various other provinces, including La Laguna. The ones made in Manila saw a 19th century city, its canals and estuaries, like a little Venice of the Orient, just as it underwent of urban reorganization. Fortunately, we can catch a glimpse of the grandeur of the earliest state of civil and religious buildings at Intramuros, like the one of the cathedral, that could be compared with images such as those created in 1792 by Fernando Brambilla during the Spanish Malaspina expedition, or the beautiful watercolors by the Filipino artist José Honorato Lozano. The Pasig River separated Intramuros, the walled city on one side where only Spaniards could live, from Binondo, on the other side where the Chinese quarter and financial district of the archipelago were located. From one of the terraces, open half a window of Mr. Dice's house in Binondo, and beyond an elegant iron gate, a wide view of the Pasig River is spread in front of us. We see the Great Bridge, the tall mast of merchant ships berthed near the custom house, and the cathedral roofs inside Intramuros. But also, floating in the river, there is a humble salamba, a traditional fishing boat with a triangular frame from which fishing nets hang. In Binondo, many foreign commercial houses had offices that double as consular buildings and private residences, like the one of the Plazuela de San Gabriel, a former US consulate. There, we see elegant domestic buildings with balconies and beautiful lattices made of wood and capit shell. In this image, we can also see the street lights, men lounging on a sidewalk, and a street sweeper. Another type of architecture, the native huts known as Bahay Kubo, made of wood and nipa palm leaves, were also documented. These structures rarely lasted long, and the material was so flammable that they were banned from the walled city of Intramuros. We can see many of these houses in the daguerreotype made in Tondo, another district of Manila known as the Garden of the City. With his keen eye and impressive talent, the photographer achieved crisp images filled with the striking details of the huts, the palm leaves, the little balconies, and the floor mats hanging to dry over railings. In front of them, in the canal, there is a sampan, a word which comes from the Chinese boat. Farmers use these vessels to transport their crops to the market. Here, near the sampan, we see bags, perhaps filled with rice, while jars holding more goods are stuck on the docks where they wait to be loaded. As we have seen, it is easy to appreciate the value of the daguerreotypes also as a record of daily life throughout the city. Today, the people of the Philippines must turn to written sources or historic images when they want to know the past. They thus depend on the work of local artists or foreigners for pictures of cities and towns, ancestors, and how they live. But now, we can also see that world in these rare daguerreotypes. Looking at these impressive records of a bygone era, the blue-red figures going about their daily lives, the boats berthed on the river and canals, one can almost sense the hustle and bustle of the thriving city that was 18th century Manila. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Noemí. That was incredible context and a beautiful overview of these absolute treasures, these rare, likely first photographic images made in the Philippines that we're lucky enough to display for the first time ever in a museum here at the AGO during Faith and Fortune. I want to turn to Katharine Whitman, my colleague, conservator of photographs here at the AGO, to better understand the type of photographs that we're looking at and to learn more about the technology of daguerreotypes. So Katie, these photographs are called daguerreotypes, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit more. Noemí gave us a brief overview, but can you tell us a bit about sort of what is a daguerreotype?
A daguerreotype is a silver-coated copper plate that is fumed with iodine in a box. Then the exposure is made, and then it is fumed in a mercury vapor box. These are one-of-a-kind images. There is no negative. They are made right in the camera, and they are amazing objects that were developed in the 1830s, but were introduced in 1839 by Louis-Jacques Mandé Daguerre at the French Académie des Sciences in Paris.
I mean, you mentioned that they're silver-coated copper plates, and the materiality of them is just kind of an incredible thing. And it's become, you know, in the exhibition, their materiality has emerged in a way that I wasn't really expecting when we were first planning it. They're displayed kind of on an angle, which makes them very easy to see. And they're displayed in very kind of specific lighting conditions to protect the safety of the object. But one thing that occurs is because of the way that they are lit, they cast this incredible sort of eerie reflection on the wall across, where the light is bouncing off of the silver-coated copper plate. And it's almost like moonlight reflecting off of the surface of the water, which is something that we see sort of in these daguerreotypes, the way that light plays off of the surface of the water. So that materiality is really, it's the sort of thing that is really kind of easy to get a sense of when you're looking at a daguerreotype in person. So you mentioned that these are the kind of first widely available form of photography. Are they the first photograph ever, or?
No, photographs were thought of before photography was even a word, since the 1810s. And I have a slide right here. In 1827, a man named Joseph Nicephore Niepce created this photograph. This is the earliest photograph that we still have. It's a view from his window in Le Gras, France. And it was an 8-hour exposure. It was that delicate of a plate. And what you're looking at is a courtyard out the window of Niepce's studio.
I can see, and I see some roofs and I see a tree, but it's you know, I guess I can understand why the invention of daguerreotype technology was such a huge advancement, because they're so much more clear and crisp and legible than this kind of first form of photography.
Right. I mean, this is an image of made by Daguerre in 1837, 2 years before it was announced at the Academy. This exposure would have been between 20 and 30 minutes. And this was the first process that had a clarity and a beauty that was just completely unimagined by people. I mean, this was a revolution. I mean,
it's totally transformative, and this is, you know, you said that it was presented at the Academy of Sciences in Paris in 1839, and the Philippine daguerreotypes are produced in the early 1840s. So it's so immediate after the advent of this technology that this becomes that this technology travels to Asia.
Yes.
That's really remarkable. So this is an image that Noemí showed a moment ago. It's at the time it was called the Plaza San Gabriel. Now it's called the Plaza Cervantes. So the original name San Gabriel was for a Dominican church in the plaza, and now Cervantes is sort of like the most famous historic Spanish writer of all time. So both names kind of reflect the presence of Spanish colonization in the Philippines, which is a big theme of the exhibition. central theme of the exhibition. But Katie, what can you tell us about this image and its material and its technology?
Oh, I love this image. The fact that you can see people going about their daily lives in it. I mean, this exposure would probably have been between a couple minutes. A couple minutes. I mean, assuming it was a bright lit day and it was taken outside, so the exposure would be faster. And in the lower left-hand corner, you can see people resting on a hot day. You can see a street sweeper in the sort of center of the image. You can see a carriage in the background with possibly a blurred horse. The fact that these images were taken in the Philippines at a time when photography had just been introduced to the public a couple of years ago is spectacular. And having, like, for instance, getting the silver plates to the area for being photographed is spectacular. You can see plate marks on the corners of the plates indicating that they came from France. And
Well, so yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was to say that these were probably gold toned, which would give them more contrast and visual acuity.
Can you tell us more about that process? Would the photographer had to bring materials from Paris with them for that
Well,
process?
they probably they would need a fuming box for the iodine or bromine or chlorine chamber. They would need the chemicals. They would need a camera for creating the exposure, for creating the image. And then they would need another box with mercury fumes, hot vapor fumes. And all of this would need to happen within minutes of the exposure being taken. It was a very regimented process to create a plate. And then it would need to be fixed with hyposodium thiosulfate, which made photography possible. It stopped the light sensitivity of the plate. And then it would be washed and gold toned and placed into a housing. This is the housing that you're seeing here is a passepartout style housing, and it's essential for keeping the plate from tarnishing, from degrading. If you think of silverware, real silverware, it tarnishes when it's exposed to the air, to the environment. And these plates needed to be sealed into a housing to prevent tarnish. Yes.
You know, I've been struck by so many aspects of this particular daguerreotype since we installed it. You know, obviously it's exceptional because it's really the only one that clearly depicts people. And I've always wondered if, you know, it looks to me like everyone on the left that's depicted are oriented maybe in the shadow of the building on a sunny day. And it may be that, you know, they're all sort of sitting or standing in place and enjoying that sort of cooler spot in the plaza. And that is the sort of reason that they're captured at all.
Yes.
That sort of like kind of fluke circumstances that meant that they were standing still or seated long enough for them to be captured. I think that's so really, really striking.
Yes.
you mentioned, you were talking about all of the materials and that were required and the fact that they were imported. And I think one thing that we wanted to explore in the exhibition text is kind of invisible labor in daguerreotype making, right? So there's a photographer that would have brought these materials and executed these processes in the Philippines. But when you describe like how much stuff there is to carry and the kind of immediacy and time sensitivity of the work, Tani and I talked about the fact that surely there must have been Filipinos involved in some way, whether it was bringing these materials around, especially the kind of photographs of the countryside, and the fact that it's hard to kind of reconstruct who might have been involved and how much labor was involved to make these photographs possible.
Yes.
What else do you think people should sort of know about daguerreotypes when they're looking at one?
That they're, well, like I mentioned before, they're one-of-a-kind image. There's no negative made to produce many of these. So these are exceptional, one-of-a-kind, amazing objects. And the fact that they're full plate, meaning that it's a whole plate of measuring 6.5 by about 8 inches in size. They're truly exceptional objects.
Well, on that note, I mean, I absolutely agree. These daguerreotypes are completely one of a kind and totally exceptional. And I thank you, Katie, and you, Noemí, so much for sharing your insights. I feel like I better understand these images now. I'd love to invite anyone in that can come see them in the exhibition. Faith and Fortune, Art Across the Global Spanish Empire will be on view until October 8th at the Art Gallery of Ontario.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adam and Noemí.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Ciao.